The next strongest argument for the belief in Christianity is miracles, more specifically the fact that science has proven that intercessory prayer done by Christians is actually effective. For those of you who don't know, intercessory prayer is prayer done on the behalf of others, and in this context, it was explicitly within the Christian belief system. This fits my definition of a miracle, as it by necessity requires the supernatural to exist for the results to have been achieved. As a side note, I'm always irritated when people misuse the term miracle. This is commonly done to move the goalposts and to broaden the definition of the term miracle, so it becomes much easier to defend the statement that miracles exist. Likewise, it is not considered a miracle for a given belief system to last thousands of years. Belief systems, like religions, are self-replicating or self-perpetuating, so any rational person would conclude it is to be expected for such a system to continue even despite some levels of adversity. People today still believe that the earth is flat, which is evidence that very old beliefs that are obviously wrong still persist. In other words, just because someone believes something, that does not mean that the belief has some inherent truth. If the Bible explained how quantum mechanics worked, that would definitely be considered miraculous, because that is a concept that no human would have come up with on their own during biblical times. If the Bible did give us important scientific information from a supernatural source, then we wouldn't have had to take all the time to figure it out for ourselves, and the world would be a much better place due to less needless human suffering. Unfortunately, the Bible didn't explain how to create effective medicine, how to use the scientific method, or how to understand the fundamental causes of disease or other important things a benevolent, all-knowing God would want an otherwise ignorant and rudimentary civilization to know. Likewise, intersections between religion and science, like the Hindu view of astronomy, are not at all miraculous. They relied on human insight, not supernatural insight, to further the field of astronomy. Tangents aside, the question should be who is responsible for the healing that the prayer produces. From the Christian point of view, it is God or some other divine entity like an angel that answers the prayer, and without the divine entity, the prayer cannot be effective. If supernatural healing could only be achieved through a prayer to a certain divine being, then that would be evidence that prayers can only be answered by a certain divine being. However, we have evidence that human intent is directly responsible for influencing the growth of barley seeds that were damaged with heat. This suggests that religion is not necessary for supernatural healing, but rather human intent can also give the desired results. This experiment was designed around demonstrating the effectiveness of psychic healing with barley seeds acting as the living element, and the heat acting as the wounding mechanism. So if prayer by necessity involves human intent, then it could definitely be possible that there is no divine entity that is answering the prayers, and that it was only the human intent all along. You could theoretically demonstrate that this theory is wrong, though, by having a computer doing the praying, which would remove the human intent from the equation. In other words, you could prove that a God exists if it responds to the prayers of a machine in a measurable way. An all-knowing God would know even if a machine is praying to it. Likewise, an all-loving God would respond to the prayers for a good cause even if a human is not doing the praying. In another experiment, mice were wounded with the scissors. Some of the mice received psychic healing by a man named Estebani, and some served as a control. The mice that received the psychic treatment had significantly more healing done in the same amount of time. We have another example worth mentioning. If the Christian God was in fact the one true God with the monopoly on the ability to supernaturally influence our world for the better, then Buddhist monks who do not worship the Christian God would have zero supernatural influence. This is demonstrably not true, though. Buddhist monks blessed some water bottles, and some other water bottles were left plain as the control. Plants were watered with these bottles to see if there was a difference. The results were that the plants that got the blessed water did measurably better than the plants that got plain bottled water. So at this point, it's well established that miraculous things can be achieved through human intention alone and do not require the invocation of the Christian God. It's not just human intent that has measurable paranormal influence, though. Dean Radin did an experiment where they had random number generators at the Burning Man festival. They found that when you had tens of thousands of people focus upon a single event, this caused significant cross-correlation between the random numbers that were being generated. In other words, even when humans are not intentionally trying to cause paranormal influence, as long as you have enough humans focused on a certain thing, this inevitably causes abnormal synchronization of what would normally be random chance around that time. A similar example of the same phenomenon was demonstrated with another experiment. This time they ran 32 quantum noise generators at once and found that when the news organizations were calling the results of the election, there was a noticeable spike. The odds of this sort of spike happening naturally were calculated as being 226 million to 1. This information tells us that millions of humans focusing on a given event results in a ripple of space-time. Humans therefore have inherent, magical, or supernatural ability. This works sometimes even if the humans involved do not intend for it to happen. If you believe that God created humans, then you must also believe that God was responsible for giving humans this inherent ability, because no other being would have the power to override an all-powerful God regarding the inherent abilities of his creations. God finds the use of inherent magic abilities by humans to be repulsive and immoral. So either God knew he was creating flawed creatures from the outset, and he knew he would be disgusted by this ability, or he originally did not find magic to be repulsive and later changed his mind. If God did change his mind about magic at some point, then he is finding fault in his own creations for his own actions. This would make God both flawed and unjust. If you disagree with the evidence that demonstrates that humans have this ability, you have to provide equally scientifically rigorous evidence that proves your opposing view is the correct one. If you choose to reject this factual information out of a reflexive reaction caused by your existing beliefs, I would ask you to take a minute and consider the consequences of this decision. Dedicating your actions in life to serving an unjust or non-existent God would be a very bad decision. This is especially true if some of these beliefs are counterproductive to having a pleasant afterlife, as I mentioned in my earlier Secular Science of Hell video. Going back to the use of magic, we have another experiment that is very important to mention. This involved baby chicks and a robot that was designed to randomly turn to the left or the right. Chicks naturally imprint on things, and they were allowed to imprint on the robot, so they wanted to follow the robot around like they would a mother hen. So when the chicks were separated away from the robot, but kept within eyesight distance, the desire of the chicks had the effect of causing the robot to wander close to the chicks. In other words, the desire of the chicks had significant influence on giving order to what would normally be random chance. This demonstrates that magic is not just an ability that humans have, and it is likely the case that all conscious creatures have this ability to some degree. There is nothing in the Bible that would explain why animals have this ability, or why some animals have the ability to make moral judgments. According to the Bible, the knowledge of good and evil is something that is only supposed to be possessed by humans. The Bible is supposed to explain why things are the way that they are, and give instructions on how to live our lives based on that information. Since it's inaccurate both historically and supernaturally, we have no reason to live as the Bible tells us to.